though. Now behind my back, won't be long till you share it in the group chat. And when I call you up, you're gonna backtrack. And you should've kept the name out your mouth. That's me though, how it all turned out. When you try to use my name for a clout, keep on going, think it's something you could talk about.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing this fine Friday, January 16th? It is 10:34 a.m. right now. I'm live a little earlier than usual today because I gotta go right around 12:30. So I have 2 hours today and, or at least for this live, I may have more time later this afternoon. So I will say, the Nick REINER news to me is personally the most interesting right now because one of my theories unsurprisingly came true and was true. So I do want to talk about that. And I want to get into some breaking or some new news for the Timothy Busfield situation. If I have time, I want to get into Hailey Bieber's sister and her alarming behaviors from 2024. But like I said, that's going to be if I have time and all that. So without further ado, it was reported last night, and is now being reported by additional news outlets this morning that Nick REINER was, in fact and indeed, in a conservatorship at least for a year. It was an LPS, that's the Peterman, whatever it is. The so-called mental health conservatorship in California. Those are the ones that automatically expire after 1 year unless the judge decides to renew them. I found some interesting things on the supposed conservator, which was not a family member, and I want to talk about that. But before we get into all of that, I want to backtrack to December 15th. 2025. Did I say it was January 16, 2025? I'm in 2026. Today's 2026. Okay. But what is time? It's all fake. Okay. They're gonna put me in a conservatorship for schizophrenia because I understand what time is. Anyway, yeah, I really don't need announcement. I don't really need people to announce that they're gonna leave and come back. I think that's stupid. Like, oh, I'll catch it later. Okay, girl, then catch it later. Get out of my face. Okay, so let's start here. December 14th, 2025. So today's January 16th. This is about a month ago. People Magazine, this Raws alerts, whatever. People Magazine is reporting that film director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle Reiner were blank to death by their son Nick. Okay, what did I say on December 15th, 1 day later? This is the first tweet I ever tweeted about this case. This is the first tweet I ever tweeted about this case. A day after they were found dead. Okay, Nick, I don't even know if Nick Reiner had been arrested yet. It was 5:45 in the morning Eastern. So it was like, what would it be, like 2:45 a.m. on December 15th in California. I don't think they had even apprehended him yet. I think he might have been in a hotel somewhere. Okay, what did I say? The rehab or jail pipeline, ... wondering if a conservatorship was in the works. People will do almost anything for freedom. Okay. This should not be taken, please. This should not be taken as me defending the actions of unaliving your parents, which I don't even know if Nick Reiner did that, by the way. There's no evidence he did it. There's really no evidence. What? He got in a fight with his dad the night before. He went to a hotel. He had no blood on him. He had no cuts on him. A room he rented had blood in it, but I don't know who put that in there. I don't know who could have been in that hotel room because it's unlikely it was Nick Reiner if he had no blood on him anywhere. He had no blood on him anywhere. There's no murder weapon. So I don't know who did what. But, for the purposes of argument, because everyone seems to be completely convinced that he did, in fact, and indeed unalive his parents, he's saying he don't remember that. No, he could be lying and all that. This is the same state ladies and gentlemen, that Britney Spears was trafficked in one of these conservatorships. All right. Now, she was in what is called a probate conservatorship. It's much more extreme. It doesn't automatically or presumptively expire after a year. But I already told y'all several times in several ways, I do have a bias. I have a bias because when it's rich people in particular, when there's trusts involved, we know there was a trust. Harvey Levin exclusively told us that there was, in fact, and indeed a trust, and Nick Reiner has one. Now, who's right now in charge of his trust? Who's administering his trust? Who knows? Who freaking knows? It ain't his parents because they're dead. All right. Could it be his siblings? Could be. Could it be a lawyer? Could it be a fiduciary? Could be. Could be. But I recognize patterns, and I do think I am a little bit psychic. I mean, like, put a 1 in the chat if you think I'm like at least a little bit psychic, because like, yeah, there's pattern recognition, but like, why is this the first thing I tweeted? Why is this the first thing I tweeted? I said, the rehab or jail pipeline. I'm wondering if a conservatorship was in the works. People will do almost anything for freedom. Now, I updated it 2 days later. I said, welp, I wish I were wrong, but looks like I probably wasn't. This is from the Wikipedia for the semi-autobiographical movie, Becoming Charlie. Now, since I've tweeted this, I, of course, watched the movie. But this is just, you know, the movie. Again, this is not Nick Reiner's life. This was a movie that was loosely based on his life. This could be something that did not happen to him. But according to the plot of the movie that he made with his dad about 10, 11, 12 years ago, 10 or 11, he was forced into a youth prison labor camp in Utah, sometimes called treatment center, sometimes called boarding school. He left as soon as he turned 18 in the movie, the movie character. There was a staged intervention as soon as he got back home. Okay, so remember that. As soon as he returned back home, done with his like school, you know, or whatever, he's like, okay, I'm an adult now. I'm ready to act right. The parents said, no, you have to go to rehab or you're going to go to jail for throwing a rock through a window. Again, this is the movie character. But then shout out to Rabbit down the Rabbit Hole News. She said, I think actually, yes, there was a conservatorship in the works at the time. One law enforcement source said that conservatorship arrangements were in the works for Nick at the time of the parents' deaths. What happened to this picture? Girl. Okay, that's fine. I have the articles anyway. Okay, so I'm just pulling up that. It got deleted? Let me show y'all this because I just pulled this up this morning. Okay, whatever. It doesn't matter. I can show you the article here anyway. Oh, it might be that. Oh, I think it's all of Twitter is acting crazy. Twitter must be down. Look. Okay. Let me pull up the article then here. Hold on. They don't make it easy, do they? Okay, here's an article I was able to find. This is from arcamax.com. Again, y'all just saw this is live. This is a live stream, so I don't want to like waste too much time. But I do think this was published in the Los Angeles Times as well. So what we know about Nick Reiner, who struggled with addiction and shared his recovery with the world. I want to focus our attention on the conservatorship part. Okay. They did everything they could for Nick, every treatment program, therapy session, put aside their lives to save his repeatedly, never known a family so dedicated to a child. To have it in this way is awful. It is awful. I mean, I am sorry that they died. That's definitely not a good thing in any way, and you should definitely not just be able to kill your parents and get away with it. So if he did do that, I'm looking forward to getting more information, more evidence as a member of the public. I'm going to say he's innocent and should be presumed innocent until proven guilty, but it is sad, and I don't in any way mean to demean that or diminish it. But look at the next sentence. One law enforcement source said conservatorship arrangements were in the works for Nick at the time of their deaths. Okay. So bear in mind that there was a conservatorship in the works for Nick at the time of his death. So again, all the way back December 14th, December 15th, I wonder if a conservatorship was in the works. And yes, it was. Yes, it was. But he had been in a conservatorship before. Let me pull up this breaking news as of yesterday. Okay, this is the New York Times. This ain't no middle of the mall newspaper publication, all right? This is like the pinnacle of mainstream media, which, if you're familiar with my channel, you know exactly just about how much that amounts to, in my opinion. But look at the title. Nick REINER was in a mental health conservatorship in 2020. Mr. REINER, who is accused of unaliving his parents, was under a year-long legal arrangement that allows for involuntary psychiatric treatment. Okay, that's a kind of misleading subtitle because the LPS conservatorship is usually only implemented after or during the time that somebody is already in an involuntary psychiatric situation, which is a 5150, or if you're in there for the 14 full days instead of just the 3 days, it'll be called a 5250. So there he is right there. Nick REINER charged with 2 counts, Okay. He was placed into a year-long mental health conservatorship in 2020, according to 2 people with knowledge of the legal arrangement. A clerk with the Los Angeles Superior Court said the conservatorship ended in 2021. Stephen Bayer, a licensed fiduciary who was appointed as the conservator, said the following mental illness, is an epidemic that is widely misunderstood, and this is a horrible tragedy. Both of the people who confirmed that Nick was, in fact, indeed in a conservatorship in 2020, declined to provide further details about the arrangement, citing confidentiality, but they did say, yes, he was in a conservatorship. The revelation of the conservatorship underscores the severity of the mental health challenges that Nick REINER faced in recent years. I disagree. I entirely disagree. Because as we have found out, and this is factual information, just because somebody got put in a conservatorship don't mean they really needed it. We know this from the Wendy Williams thing. She got put in a conservatorship because she had frontotemporal dementia, supposedly, allegedly, but she got her own diagnosis from a different doctor who said she don't have that. And I think it is clear that she doesn't have that because Bruce Willis also has frontotemporal dementia and he is rapidly deteriorating. Wendy Williams is not deteriorating. She might seem a little quirky, but she hasn't gotten worse in this situation. It's also very strange and very weird to me that it's not a family member who has this conservatorship over Wendy Williams. And again, like I said, y'all, this motives should always be considered in cases like this because people get shot on a street corner for $200. All right. Imagine what criminal grifters will do for a couple $100 million. All right. So this is just where we live in hell. And if you want to be an ostrich and put your head in the ground, shame on you, because it could happen to you and it could happen to your grandma and it could happen to your little sister. Now I'm talking about rich people here, but there exist incentives to put all of us in conservatorships. And these incentives are sometimes financial because there's government funding, federal government funding. You know, a lot of people are out here squawking, arfing like seals for the so-called FREE Act. Do you know what the FREE Act does? It gives federal funds to federal slave owners. You can call them conservators if you want to, but it's stealing away of citizens who haven't committed any crimes, rights, and reassigning them to federal employees. That's slavery. Argue with your mama, don't argue with me. So I wish I was wrong about this stuff. That's the thing. I mean, I lose sleep at night sometimes. I lose sleep at night sometimes because I wish I was wrong about this. Because what is it that the first thing people start saying about me when they don't like what I'm saying? Adam 2216, Grand Mason of Nashua, who has his own criminal family to worry about. Don't need to be worried about what I'm doing at all. But all I do is come out here and tell y'all the truth about how somebody died according to public records and public documents. Tell y'all somebody lied about how somebody died in their care after trying to get one of these conservatorships over Amanda. Lima Yevrimovich tried to get an LPS conservatorship over Amanda Rabb. It didn't work. So instead, she just got court-ordered treatment. I come out here and tell y'all, okay, the girl, they lied about how she died. And Adam 2216 Grand Mason, instead of saying, oh, that's alarming, you know what he said? Women like me should be locked up because we're sick in the effing head. Now, imagine Adam 2216 Grand Mason or someone of that ilk had any type of actual power and control over me. Imagine he even lived in my same state and he had connections with the cops. Just because someone is in a conservatorship does not in any freaking way mean they needed to be in one. Now, I wish we did live in a world where just because somebody is in a conservatorship or a guardianship, you know for sure they needed it. But if you think about all the people, it's really a catch-22. If you think about all the people that are in conservatorships, Vivian Lee Thoreen, which was one of Jamie Spears' lawyers in Britney Spears' conservatorship, she said she's never seen a person get out of a conservatorship like the one Britney was in. Never. Never. So if the conservatorship is supposed to be so helpful, why doesn't it help? You give the person's rights. Now, in a probate conservatorship, again, I want to be very clear. 2 different conservatorships in California. LPS, which is the mental health conservatorship, and the probate conservatorship. Probate conservatorships were originally supposedly supposed to just be for people that are like in a coma. People that have dementia and they need their businesses run. They need decisions made. People that are brain dead. That's what a probate conservatorship is supposed to be. Not swinging from the freaking rafters in Las Vegas for 3 straight years. All right. That's not making hundreds of millions of dollars for your captors, for your owners. That isn't what it's supposed to be. But that is exactly how it was used. Again, I reiterate, just because someone was in a conservatorship doesn't mean they were supposed to be, and it doesn't mean they needed it. It could possibly mean they needed it. It could also possibly mean they were enslaved and forced to work like a racehorse, especially when you start looking at famous people with a lot of money and a lot of brand power. When they want to start saying no to a dance move, when they want to start saying they don't want to do another residency. Oh, okay, bet. Well, you're going to be our slave and you're going to do it. So, Rob Reiner, his wife found, okay, 2 counts. He's being represented by a public defender. He has a serious mental illness. How do we know? How do we know? He had struggled in the weeks before his arrest with a change in his medication. 2 other people familiar with the case or with his health told the New York Times. This seems to me like the 2 siblings. I think they're just talking to everybody. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. The New York Times didn't call me up and tell me who the 2 sources were, but that's what it seems like to me. One of those people said he had been diagnosed at different times with schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder. So now we're getting another 3rd story about these diagnoses. First, it was schizophrenia. Then it was schizoaffective disorder, not schizophrenia. And now it is both schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder. Now, what I will say is we already knew this. We read the medical literature yesterday and determined based on the medical literature that is available freely, open source to the public. We all read it together yesterday, that schizoaffective disorder and schizophrenia in the DSM books that the psychiatrists and mental health professionals use to diagnose people are indistinguishable. There's really no evidence-based difference between schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder in the medical literature. There's really no symptomatic difference. The symptoms overlap. It's just kind of like right next to each other on this spectrum. And we did look into these symptoms of schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder, and a lot of them are very, very subjective. It's like, sees things and hears things that aren't there. Well, what if y'all are all deaf in the family and he can just hear a high frequency and you can't? Um, what was another one? Has delusions, behaves in manner that's odd. Well, I have an example just right off the bat. He went to that party that night, right? The Conan O'Brien party, and his supposedly odd behavior was asking people if they were famous. That's not that odd to me. That there's many reasons why he might want to know that. There's reasons I might want to know that. If I went to them parties, I kind of want to go to one of those parties and just have a hidden camera. Like, obviously, I'm never going to do this, but like, just hypothetically, I would be acting very odd. I would be acting very odd. So it's like, what? I'm schizophrenic too? Because I don't know how to act at Conan O'Brien's Christmas party. Yeah, technically, that's one, not, it doesn't mean I'm schizophrenic, but like, that's one of the symptoms. Acting odd, behaving oddly, but like, odd according to who? I think Rob Reiner and them were acting odd when they were making those PDF file jokes at the Rob Reiner roast, and they're laughing. That's odd to me. Steve-O, the failed clown, having a PDF file tattoo on his arm that then he covered up with a beast itty tattoo, ality beast, and you know what I mean, tattoo. That's odd. He has a sperm or something swimming on his forehead tattoo. That's odd. So is he schizophrenic too? Jess Margera is still obsessed with talking about his brother Bam, even though Bam doesn't even mention his stupid crusty name anymore. That's odd. Where's their schizophrenia diagnosis? And I'm being facetious. I don't actually think they should be diagnosed with schizophrenia. I'm just saying, like, what does it really even mean to be diagnosed with schizophrenia? You heard something that wasn't there. You saw something that wasn't there. I keep using this example, but you know, people sometimes are colorblind. They don't see the colors. Maybe the people who are not colorblind are the wrong ones. Maybe there's really no colors. Maybe we just have a disorder that lets us see colors, but the people that are colorblind, maybe they're the normal ones. Maybe we're all hallucinating these colors. It's true. I'm not even being facetious. Who knows? How do you know for sure all these colors, that pink bow, how do you know it's pink? How do you know it's not yellow or orange? How do you know? Well, you have eyes and you can see, but couldn't they be messed up? Couldn't something be wrong with them? How do we know? Who's the authority? And that's why I don't like these symptoms of schizophrenia. Okay. Sometimes there's symptoms of stuff, low blood pressure, high blood pressure, dehydration. You can run a test, you can see things, but like, or, you know, you have like like you can't stand up. If you're paralyzed, you can't, you know, from the waist down, you can't walk. These are things that are quantifiable, verifiable, but like, thinks things and hears things we don't hear. Now, I'm not saying schizophrenia isn't real, but I am saying that I'm not sure we know for sure. Everyone who's ever been diagnosed with schizophrenia has the same thing. And I don't know if they really have the right diagnostic criteria. That's my opinion. I'm not a medical professional. So, yeah, it's kind of like you go against the narrative and you're schizophrenic. And it's like, all that's fine and good. If people want to go and seek treatment and they get diagnosed with schizophrenia and they're taking medicine and it's helping their life, I am so glad to hear that, because it seems like schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder is something really difficult to deal with for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones. It seems like it's very difficult. Now, I was watching the Sloan Bella, you know, the YouTube psychic, Sloan Bella, and she had her own like kind of definition, explanation for schizophrenia and what it is. And I really did like it, but I'll spare you what it was for now. I would encourage you to go watch her video after this one. She always has very insightful things to say, and she's usually ends up proving to be on point. So, all right. The medication he was taking was effective, according to who? I don't know. I'd need to ask him. I'd need to know more. But the side effects led him to switch to a new medication about a month before his parents were unalived. So this is a possibly vaguely different reason for him stopping his medicines yet again. It was, first of all, they just stopped working, so they switched them. Excuse me, I said stopping his medicines. I meant switching them. But to switch a medication does necessarily imply that he stopped taking one, because if he had just added one, it would say he started taking a new medication, but this says switch, so it means ceasing the one and starting the other. And just stopping medicine too can have its own side effects. So whatever the side effects were, whether it was weight gain or whatever, this anonymous source, who we don't know who it is, but it is the New York Times. I feel like they probably do vet the people, which is why I think it probably is one of the siblings, because this is the New York Times, but I don't know. It does seem like they talked to maybe 4 people, 2 people and then 2 other people. The Los Angeles County Public Defender's Office declined to comment, and so did a representative for the district attorney's office. That Mr. Reiner, that's Nick, had been put into a conservatorship indicates that a judge had determined he had a grave disability. Well, I mean, that doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything, because Britney Spears, a judge said she had dementia. You know if any doctors ever said that? No, they never did. 26 years old, Britney Spears had dementia. And there was never any medical proof. Never any medical proof. The judge just determined she had dementia. Also, Britney tried to hire her own lawyer. The judge denied Britney hiring her own lawyer, and there was no medical proof. So again, just because a judge did something and just because somebody's family member did something does not necessarily mean they needed it. Now, maybe Nick Reiner did need it. I don't know. For me personally, I don't really think most people need a conservatorship. If you are committing crimes, you should go to jail. And if your family don't like what you're doing, suck it up. Get in line. Who cares? If you don't want him living in your house for free, kick him out. I don't understand why that requires a conservatorship. Now, what I do think is interesting is the conservatorship, the LPS conservatorship, supposedly started in 2020 and lasted until 2021, at some point in 2021. But guess what else happened in 2020? That's the same year Nick was diagnosed with one of these schizo, one or the others, according to Harvey Levin's documentary, the TMZ documentary, The REINER Murders. So the same year he was put into a conservatorship, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, I just showed y'all, it's all over the place with like, what does he even have as a diagnosis? And then when were those diagnoses given? But according to this New York Times article, he was diagnosed with both schizophrenia and at another different time, schizoaffective disorder. I don't know which one he was diagnosed with in 2020, but according to the TMZ documentary, it was schizoaffective disorder. That was the same year he was put into this LPS conservatorship. Yeah, okay. So Ashley said, we can also keep in mind that psychosis can easily happen if you're changing medicines. If you can't sleep for a couple days, also that could cause psychosis. Definitely could produce what would seem like schizophrenia. It could be drug-induced as well. Auditory hallucinations are merely one possible symptom. You don't have to have them, though, to be diagnosed. Okay. You have to be pretty I'm not even reading this bullshit. Okay. Mr. Reiner was put into an LPS conservatorship. This is the Lanterman-Petrus Short Act. This established a new process for involuntary psychiatric treatment. Okay. So all the way back in 1967, they've been trying to take our rights. Okay. All the way back at the founding of this country. I mean, there was slavery at first. And now they're like, oh, I guess we can't call it slavery anymore, but we could still own people. We could still have the federal government own people's rights, but we just have to call it something else, something cute, something better, something medical instead of slavery. We'll just call it a conservatorship. Okay, got it. That's what they're doing to us. That's what they're doing to us. Us, the people. Slavery, conservatorships is distinct from the system that's commonly used to take over medical and financial decisions for dementia or developmental disability. That is the one they put Britney in with, again, no medical proof. LPS conservatorships typically originate. Okay, how do they typically originate? How do these LPS conservatorships that Nick Reiner was in normally start? Involuntary psychiatric hospitalization. Anybody can just call and say you're crazy, y'all. We've seen it on body cam footage. Bam Margera was doing absolutely nothing wrong. Nothing wrong when he was in Broward County. They showed up. Some state-sponsored slave owner showed up, doctor or psychiatrist or social worker or whatever, talked to him for a couple minutes and stole his rights away. He was not breaking the law. His mom was standing there going, I'm scared. I'm scared he's going to hurt me. But she was sitting there drinking with him at the bar when the cops showed up, totally calmly, and he was drawing on a napkin. Just because somebody's weird and quirky doesn't mean they deserve to be a slave. In Los Angeles, officials from the Office of the Public Guardian, the Office of the Public Slave Owner, assess whether a conservatorship is warranted and make their case to a judge. So the government, the Office of the Public Guardian, what in the freaking monarch bullshit is this? The Office of the Public Guardian gets to decide about whether you have rights or not. These are supposed to be God-given and inalienable rights. The system allows a professional conservator, someone who gets paid money for being your slave owner, or a person close to the patient, such as a family member. Now, this is big because we are told Nick REINER was put into a conservatorship and the conservator was not a family member. This is big, okay? Because look, the system allows either a professional conservator, and we're going to get into Stephen Bear, or a person close to the patient. Either one. So it could have been a family member, but it wasn't. Why? To make decisions about medical treatment, it allows a conservator to make decisions about medical treatment, including psychiatric medications. Another way to put that is puts a stranger in charge of drugging you as a slave. A stranger can determine that you, his new property, have to take psychiatric medications. Okay. And this isn't just, we just learned in the TMZ documentary, simple SSRIs. This is something that they prescribe to every freaking 19-year-old who goes to therapy. Lexapro, Paxil, caused him to murder his own son. That was his legal defense. And he, in fact, and indeed did get off from murder. Like he did not have to serve prison time for murder because of SSRIs. Think about how powerful some of these psychiatric medications are. And Mr. Stephen Bear, he got to just decide. Now, do I know for sure? Do I know for sure that Stephen Bear did, in fact, and indeed force Nick REINER to take medications against his will? No, I do not know that. But he had the legal authority to do so, according to this New York Times article. It lasts a year, after which the conservator has the opportunity to try to renew it. It's unclear why Nick's conservatorship didn't last beyond 1 year. The county's Department of Mental Health, which oversees the public guardian slave owner office, declined to comment or provide any documentation from the legal proceedings, citing patient confidentiality. Now, I have looked in the Los Angeles, LA courts website for any paperwork about a conservatorship, and this has been for the last month I've been looking, but I guess it's under seal. Nick had long struggled with drug addiction. I guess that means he deserved to be a slave too. It's crazy. He had been in drug treatment about 18 times as a teenager, which means against his will, right? Because what teenager, you can't legally enter into a contract. Well, you can, but it won't be valid. So his parents forced him 18 times as a teenager. Circling through residential facilities across the country and sometimes experiencing homelessness and conflict with his parents. He has alluded to broader behavioral health issues. Schizophrenia is a severe brain disorder, usually managed with medications and therapy. Antipsychotic medications work by blocking receptors for the neurotransmitter dopamine, which affects functions like motivation, reward, mood, attention, sleep. In most patients, they can reduce symptoms like hallucinations and paranoia to a manageable level, but they have serious side effects, including weight gain, which contributes to a high rate of cardiac disease. Okay, so I had some people in here the other day saying, oh, that sounds like vanity. It sounds like just image-based, that Nick REINER just didn't want to be fat. So, he was more worried about his image. He was being vain. That's vanity. He was more worried about his image than he was about his mental health. That's not true. Like, weight gain is a health concern. Like, I think it's fine that we and good that we have body positivity movement and stuff, but like, hello, too much weight gain can absolutely lead to high rates of cardiac disease, especially when those same medications that are causing the weight gain also cause you to feel like you don't have energy. And that's something that Bam Margera reported. He said he was depressed when he went into rehab, but he became more and more and more and more depressed because he was gaining weight and he was not allowed or even able because he was gaining weight to skateboard. And that's the only thing that brought him joy. So he's like, if I could just, I'm just happy just being able to skate. Couldn't even skateboard because he had said he didn't have any energy. He was gaining weight. His joints were hurting. All of his pre-existing injuries were exacerbated and hurting because he was inflamed because of these medications. So it's not just because you don't like the way you look, but even if you don't like the way you look at a certain weight, that's totally valid. Who in the hell are we in the public to say, oh, that's vanity? Like, y'all need to remember we have certain rights. Okay. And it's like you're allowed to make your own healthcare decisions and your own body decisions. Look at all the BBLs in Hollywood. Should we put all those people in a conservatorship? Many patients stop taking the medication saying that they leave them sluggish and unmotivated. Researchers have found that as many as half of patients do not take antipsychotic drugs as prescribed, often leading to relapse. REINER was held at, comments indicated that Mr. Jackson may have been preparing defense centered on mental health. It's unclear whether Nick's current counsel, the public defender, will take a similar approach. The district attorney told reporters this month that he was confident a jury would ultimately convict Nick for the brutal murmurs of his parents. Considering the mental health issues at play, Nick's counsel will have to assess whether he's even competent to understand the court proceedings or help with his own defense. Questioning his competency would initiate a process that involves medical exams and culminates in a decision by a judge or a jury. It can take months or years of medical treatment and court proceedings for a defendant to be found competent to stand trial. Jurors reach a verdict of not guilty. Okay. So that's the news as of today. So I look up this Stephen Bear guy, right? And I don't know. I will say this. I do not know for sure if this is the same Stephen Bear, but it's exactly the same spelling. This is on the dca.ca.gov, Department of Consumer Affairs Professional Fiduciaries Bureau. And this is, again, Stephen Bear, professional fiduciary. His license is active since September 10th, 2014. And he has his license going to expire at the end of this year. I guess he can, get it renewed. But there's some stuff on here that I saw. So let's go fiduciary information. The total client assets under his, purview at this point is $18 million. His license number is 792. Date client assets reported. So he reported 2 months ago. Now, they have a public document on this guy. It brings you to this page. Again, I'm not 100% sure this is exactly the same Stephen Bear, but this is Stephen Bear shows up in the California government fiduciary website. It is hereby stipulated and agreed. Stephen Bear applied for a professional fiduciary license. This is back in 2013. Issued by the Professional Fiduciaries Bureau of California. The Chief Professional Fiduciaries Bureau, applicant Stephen Bear, representing himself, has chosen not to exercise his right to be exercised by, represented by counsel. On or about March 10th, 2014, he applied for a professional fiduciary license. He was denied the license. Then on December 31st, New Year's Eve 2013, he filed for bankruptcy. The bankruptcy was discharged on April 7th, so 4 months later. Business and Professions Code 6533C states, in order to meet qualifications for licensure as a professional fiduciary, a person has to meet all the following requirements. Number 1, have not committed any acts, or letter C, have not committed any acts that are grounds for denial. The board may deny a license pursuant to this subdivision only if the crime or act substantially related to the qualifications, functions, or duties of the business or profession for which the application is made. The act of a recent discharge of Chapter 7 bankruptcy is substantially related to the qualifications, functions, and duties of the profession. But look at the timeline. He applied, oh my God, he filed for bankruptcy at the very last day of 2013. About 3 months later, March 10th, he applied to be a fiduciary in California and handle and manage other people's money. Now, to be extremely clear, it is my understanding that LPS conservatorships do not manage finances. They manage day-to-day decisions like where you live and your health care and, help you manage like child custody and stuff like that. I'm not saying Stephen Bear, even if this is the same Stephen Bear, which it's exactly the same spelling, and it's the only one I found information for. So I am assuming this is the same Stephen Bear, but I really don't know. All I know is the public information, like what I'm showing to y'all. Why on earth would this guy file bankruptcy saying effectively, I have bit off more than I could chew with my finances? And then 3 months later, before the bankruptcy is even discharged, it was still in the courts. It was still in the bankruptcy courts. He filed to become a conservator or a fiduciary. He tried to get his fiduciary license. Well, thankfully, the Office of the Public Guardian said no, but they kind of did let him have it on a probationary status. Voluntarily, knowingly waives his right, culpability. He admits to each and every charge. He agrees the licensure is subject to discipline based on the cited facts. He agrees to be bound. This is like on the file of this guy. Again, I think it's the same Stephen. But then that got me to go into, so when did they say he filed for the bankruptcy? They said he filed, this supposedly was, I believe this is Nick REINER's conservator from 2020. This guy, they said he filed for bankruptcy on December 31st, 2013. Okay, so I went to the bankruptcy court website, Pacer, and I'm going to pull up what the results were. Now, here are the results when you type in Stephen Bear. I don't know. Again, this could possibly be a very common name, whatever the case may be. But there are 2 bankruptcies under the same name, Stephen Bear. One is in 2013. And when was it filed? Look at the date filed. December 31st, 2013. So the same exact day as what we just saw here. That wasn't the only bankruptcy this person filed for. They filed for another bankruptcy 3 years prior, August 18th, 2010. This person clearly cannot keep their own finances in order, but they're applying to be a fiduciary of other people's finances right at the time they were broke as hell, second bankruptcy. All of a sudden they wanted to become somebody else's. And this, what I'm showing y'all right now is exactly why I have such distrust of the government putting a professional fiduciary in charge of anything. What the hell does this man know about managing finances? $18 million of other people's money when he couldn't keep his own house in order? I don't like it. It's kind of like whenever Jamie Spears was allowed to be Britney's conservator, in part because apparently Britney was addicted to drugs, which never was proven. Jamie Spears was like actively having treatment for alcoholism himself. How are you going to get put in charge of somebody else's stuff? You can't handle your own stuff. I don't like it. I don't get it. Now, again, I want to be very clear. I don't know that that's the same Stephen Bear. However, that's the only Stephen Bear I was able to find in the California fiduciary website. So maybe I got it wrong. Somebody please correct me if I got it wrong. Okay. So I also found a lawsuit against this guy. Breach of contract, commercial in Los Angeles from 1999. What was it? Monique Berry versus Stephen Bear. Now, this is 1999, so I don't know what exactly that. Well, I'll show y'all. It was just like the Entrellis. I haven't had time to like look this case up or whatever, but I did want to just show y'all that was another thing I found. I don't know if that's the same Stephen Bear. Okay, so okay. Something else I wanted to bring up to y'all was that same article that I already showed you, but it's what we know about Nick REINER, who struggled with addiction and shared his recovery with the world. I believe this was posted in the Los Angeles Times as well, but this is arcamax.com. He had gotten clean. So they go through his story. Nick was in and out of rehab. He had gotten clean by 2015. He worked with his dad on Being Charlie, a semi-autobiographical film about addiction recovery. Many aspects of the movie were inspired by Nick's relationship with his father. Nick gave an interview about Being Charlie alongside his family at the Toronto Film Festival in 2015. Okay, so they start talking about this interview. And I want to bring to your attention a couple of things that were said, not only by Nick, but also by the father, by Rob REINER, and also by the mother, Michelle Singer REINER. They said his decision to quit substance was driven by a practical realization. He said, I just got sick of doing it. I come from a nice family. I'm not supposed to be out here on the streets and in homeless shelters doing all these things. Now, during this interview, Rob, the dad, rest in peace, said he regretted valuing the advice of counselors over the voice of his son. This is a Rob REINER quote, when Nick would tell us that it wasn't working for him, we wouldn't listen. When Nick tried to express, and some of this would have been before 18, we wouldn't listen. We were desperate. And because the people who had diplomas on their wall, we listened to them when we should have been listening to our son. Then the mom pipes up, Michelle. She says, we were so influenced by these people. They would tell us he's a liar. He was trying to manipulate us, meaning Nick. And we believed them. So, I mean, in a way, I think it's a little bit of shirking accountability and responsibility when that's your kid. So if you're going to listen to a stranger who says he's a manipulative liar, like that's on you. Nick tried to tell them. When Nick tried to tell them it wasn't working, they wouldn't listen. This is a Rob REINER quote. We wouldn't listen. We were desperate. And because the people had diplomas on their walls, we listened to them when we should have been listening to our son. The mom adds, we were so influenced by these people, they would tell us he's a liar. He was trying to manipulate us, and we believed them. Nick talked about the many different rehab centers and programs he was forced to go to without success. In 2016, he told People magazine that he lived on the streets because he refused to go to the rehab facilities. So this is laying out not only a history of the parents not listening to, not believing, right? Like we thought he was lying. We thought he was a manipulative liar. And what did Lima say? Addicts are master manipulators. Okay. So again, it's a lifelong stigma if you're ever diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it is a lifelong stigma if you are ever having a substance abuse. All of this stuff about there's no more stigma. You should be able to come out and just be honest about your stuff. No, you can't. No, you can't. Because even if you are being honest, somebody might have just told your mama, addicts are master manipulators. They're just liars. You just can't believe them. I mean, we have a history of them not listening to Nick, him not being listened to when it came to his own healthcare decisions. Not only that, but again, if Nick Reiner's life was anything like that movie, what happened in the movie was it wasn't like he turned 18 and he just got to go to college. No, he had been in 18 rehabs as a kid, so he really wasn't on track to do that. I don't know how he would have come up with any type of spare time after getting chased around and interventioned around to have a career. So it's very easy for people now looking back to be like, he's a spoiled, rich, entitled brat that was living in his parents' home. But like when he was 18, he ran away from the youth prison camp and then he was immediately given a choice, rehab or jail. Come to find out in the movie, that wasn't even a true choice. It was just made up. And it was because the dad was trying to control the son. Now, it's really easy to now say, or to years later say, we were just trusting the experts. That's very Nuremberg of them. Just following orders. That's your child. And they're admitting we didn't listen to him. He tried to tell us what he needed. He tried to tell us what would be helpful. We were told he was a liar and we believed it. He said, if I wanted to do it my way because they thought I was a liar, a manipulative liar, if I didn't want to go to the programs they wanted to send me to, and who knows what they were doing, who knows, they might have been doing electroshock therapy. That's something that they do use on schizophrenic people. Therapeutically is what they call it. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is something that is widely known. Google it if you don't believe me. Who knows what they were doing? But he said, if I didn't do it, he couldn't say no, because if he didn't go to the programs, he had to be homeless, which that's fine. You don't have to let somebody live in your house. All I'm saying is there's a lot more context than what I'm seeing be given to this Nick Reiner story. He told the magazine that he could have died in the streets. So it's not just simply being homeless. He said it's all luck. You roll the dice and you hope you make it. So I could die or possibly die. I could put my life at risk. I could put my life at risk or go to these programs that they were trying to make me go to. And so like, did he have a choice? Yeah. But did he really have a choice? Now, something else that we found out yesterday is one of the risk factors of schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. One of the risk factors is involuntary treatment. If you missed yesterday's live, it was 3 hours long, but you should go watch it. At the time of the premiere, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, the Times reported, I think the LA Times, that Rob Reiner and his wife, at their worst moments, wondered if there was an end in sight and whether it would be the tragic one that a voice in the back of their heads kept telling them was coming. Rob Reiner said the filming brought back tough memories. It was very, very hard going through it the first time with these painful and difficult highs and lows, and then making the movie dredged it all up again. But he said the process of making the movie was also therapeutic, allowing them to work through a lot of past trauma and develop a closer relationship. Family friends told the LA Times that Rob and Nick got into an argument on Saturday evening at a party at Conan O'Brien's home, and that many people noticed Nick acting strangely. Acting strangely. The couple was found in the home earlier in his career. Don't care about that. They did everything for Nick, every treatment program. One law enforcement source said that conservatorship arrangements were in the works for Nick at the time of the killings. In interviews, Nick praised his parents for helping him find sobriety. NPR asked them whether they'd want to work together again after being Charlie. Nick did not want to work with him again. I think for now it's best for me at least, to be sort of independent. He was obviously craving independence. He never got to be his own person, ever. And he probably never will. He said, "That's not to say I didn't have an amazing experience, but I don't want to work with him again." And then Rob, the dad, added that Nick was the heart and soul of the film, and anytime he would get an opportunity to work with him, he would do it, but I understand him wanting to forge his own way. I do know what that's about. I went through it, and he's brilliant, and he's talented, and he's going to figure out his path. But, I mean, was he ever really given the chance? Was he ever really given the chance? I don't know. Personally, I don't know. So also wanted to show y'all, to remind you of this. I wanted to remind you of this article, this one article that we did read yesterday. Now, this is on psychiatrist.com, but it was published in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry. Okay, so this is like a medical journal. Relationship, this is published like a year ago too. It's like kind of new. Relationship between trauma, PTSD, and schizophrenia. Relevance for outcomes, screening, and interventions. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I wanted to remind y'all of this part. Approximately 70 to 98% of patients with schizophrenia have experienced a traumatic event in their life. Patients with schizophrenia are also more likely to have suffered adverse childhood experiences, so childhood trauma, which in turn increase the risk of psychosis and schizophrenia. There's also evidence that traumatic experiences influences the content of the psychotic symptoms, including the content of the hallucinations and delusions. Moreover, the frequency and severity of early traumatic events during both adulthood and childhood correlate positively with the frequency and severity of PTSD. History of childhood trauma, including emotional abuse, abuse, and physical neglect, correlates with higher levels of positive, general, and depressive symptoms and poorer levels of global functioning. So this right here is one of the important parts I wanted to read to y'all and remind you of. Comorbid. So the section is impact of PTSD in patients with schizophrenia. Comorbid PTSD has been associated with poor social outcome, functioning, and quality of life in people with schizophrenia. Additionally, comorbid PTSD is also associated with a greater number of chronic physical health problems, including asthma, diabetes, hypertension, and cancer in people with schizophrenia. When analyzing correlates of this co-occurrence between PTSD and schizophrenia, there are no significant differences between patients with PTSD versus without regarding number of hospitalizations. Wait, this isn't what I wanted to read. Hold on. Okay, this is what I wanted to read. Trauma and schizophrenia. Trauma is probably the most important known and modifiable environmental risk factor associated with schizophrenia that has also been identified as a transdiagnostic risk factor. Okay, so trauma is a risk factor for developing schizophrenia. The link between psychosis and trauma is complex, multifactorial, and likely also bidirectional. Different proposed pathways include the following. Oh, again, I want the involuntary thing. Is that the only one? As a result of behaviors or experiences, so one of the proposed pathways of dealing with this is this theory that as a result of behaviors or experiences that are related to psychosis or involuntary treatment. So there's doctors out here who are doctors, actual professionals, who are saying that schizophrenia symptoms can be worsened because of involuntary treatment. Well, we just were told and have been being told for a month, he was put in involuntary treatment. He also said that it also was said that the reason that he went to rehab or whatever, the very first treatment he ever went to, was because he was taking like a Percocet and a Xanax, which, look, you shouldn't be taking that if it's not prescribed to you. But he learned how to be a drug addict in rehab. He said this. He said the first time he ever did any like real like street, like going out into the like dangerous parts of the world to, where he could get shot or killed, That was all learned in rehab. He learned it from people in rehab. And then he would get out of rehab. The people who were in rehab with him would meet up with him, and then they would do the substances. So that doesn't mean, doing a Percocet is better in any way. I mean, you can get addicted to anything, and including pills. But I say all this to say, I mean, Kanye West said it too. He said, I've never been through more trauma than being locked up involuntarily, drugged against my will, and put in zombie land. Bam Margera said it too. Britney Spears said it too. So if these involuntary psychiatric treatments are supposed to help so much, why are they actually hurting? If these involuntary psychiatric incarcerations where people are drugged, often intravenously, against their will, intramuscularly, why don't it work? If they're supposed to help, why ain't it helping? If it's supposed to help, why is it hurting? If these doctors are so smart that they know what medicines people need, why are the medicines not working? Well, sometimes they do work. Okay, cool. So sometimes they do work, so we should all be slaves? No, thank you. No, thank you. So let's just think about everything we know. Everything we know or have been told, because I don't know if I can know any of this stuff, but the stuff we've been told, and take it all together and see if we can start to see a little motive pattern forming. Wait, there was one other thing I wanted to show y'all. This article. This is the other thing I wanted to show y'all. Clinical, this one, it was written in or published in 2012. Clinical features of unaliving your parents, that's called parricide, in patients with schizophrenia. The objective of the study was to investigate the factors associated with unaliving your parents in patients with schizophrenia who actually killed their parents. Among patients with schizophrenia, okay, so they get into the method. What were the results? The results were that there were significant factors associated with parricide, where, people will kill their parents, and they had to be schizophrenic, right? So it was like people that killed their parents and also had schizophrenia diagnoses. What are the risk factors? Nick had a bunch of them. Look at the risk factors. Living with the victim, which would be in this case the parent that got killed, or the parents. The sex of the victim, offense-provoking events. So what provokes the offense of parricide, according to this study that's published on the NIH.gov website, by the way? Scolding from the parent, threatening forced hospitalization. That's a risk factor. When someone is threatened with being forced into a mental facility, threatened to be forced into a conservatorship, maybe, forcing medication on the patient. These are considered to be, in the medical literature, offense-provoking events. This is not to say Nick REINER didn't have a choice in his actions if he did do what he's accused of doing. And this is not to say that the parents deserved it. This is not to say that they asked for it. Rest in peace to them. But what it is to say is the medical literature over 10 years ago, years before Becoming Charlie was ever made, was giving risk factors for getting parricided by your kid. And one of the risk factors, living with the parents. Others are offense-provoking events. So when people with schizophrenia diagnoses killed their parents, there were provoking events, offense-provoking. That doesn't mean causing, doesn't mean a victim blame. Please, I'm not saying that. The offense-provoking events, scolding. Oh, you mean like getting hollered at in front of everybody at a celebrity party where you didn't want to be at? That you weren't invited to? Threatening forced hospitalization, where we were told right after the killings, a concern by a law enforcement source, he was in the process of getting conserved. They were in the works to put him in a conservatorship. Somebody was. Who could put him in a conservatorship? It's Maybe Stephen Bear was going to go out another crack, but I bet it was somebody in his family. And forcing medication. What else do we know? His medications had, in fact and indeed, been changed up in the month leading up to the killings. So, was it possibly the case? I don't know. This is just totally a question. It's not even a speculation. I'm just asking. Is it possible he wanted to get off of these medicines or change the medicines? His parents did not want him to change his medicines, and they were going to make sure that he took the drugs they wanted him to take, and he said never again, because he was in a conservatorship already for a year. Significant factors associated with parricide among homicidal patients with schizophrenia are living with the victim being a woman, which one of his victims was a woman if he did it, and offense-provoking events including scolding, threatening to forcibly put them in a hospital. I'm gonna 5150 you. I'm gonna send you back to zombie land. That's an offense-provoking event to get killed by your kid if they got schizophrenia. Now, I am not saying somebody that does this deserves it. I'm not saying that anybody deserves to die based on something they say. I genuinely don't believe that that should happen. But this is a scientific medical literature. I'm just reading it. And forcing medication on the patient. Drug compliance was low in both groups. So it's like their drug of choice, fine. You can force a drug onto somebody, that's fine. But if you want to self-medicate, that's not fine, and you need to be in a conservatorship. They want to put you in a conservatorship so they can drug you with drugs, but you're in a conservatorship because you're on drugs. And then even if the drugs are making you unable to function, you can't, you have low mood, you have low libido, you have low motivation, you have low desire, it's effing up all your dopamine and your norepinephrine, and you're like, dude, I got to get off of this. I can't function. Isn't that the very reason you put somebody in the mental health conservatorship anyway? Because they're on the drugs and they can't function. So then you get them in the conservatorship. Now they're on the drugs you want them to be on, and they also still can't function. Like, where's the help here? What's helping here? This feels like they purposely made him like this so he could never be his own person. This is a thing that does happen. I'm not saying that's what happened in this case, but that does happen. These helicopter parents, these codependent parents, they can never let their kids grow up. They can never let their kids become their own person. I mean, the other kid lives across the street or down the street or something. Hold on, I need to send a text. Okay. So what did I want to say? Okay, so this was my little let's look at everything we know thing. So think about everything we know all together. He was diagnosed with schizo something in 2020. I think maybe schizoaffective disorder. That same year, he was put into a 1-year LPS conservatorship, which does allow, if the judge allows, the legal mechanism exists to drug the slave, the conservatee, against their will. That same year he was put into a conservatorship, he was diagnosed. He was taking the medications according to even his own father, and he was doing great just a few months ago, back in September, according to his own father, who's now no longer living. Rest in peace. We know Nick had a tumultuous relationship with his dad. It was reported that all the way back in 2015 on the set of the movie, they would get in loud arguments, loud screaming matches on set, and then kiss each other on the lips to make up. And that seems to have continued on all the way through recently when they got into an argument in public, fighting with each other at Conan O'Brien's party. We also know that his meds were changed in the months leading up to the murders. There's different reports on why. One was weight gain, one was it stopped working, one he didn't like the side effects. But in any event, we are told in more ways and more articles than one that his medications were changed. We're also told that somebody was trying to put him into a conservatorship. It was in the works, according to a law enforcement source, at the time of the unalivings. We also learned yesterday in the live from the medical literature that 4 of the risk factors for adults with schizophrenia to commit unaliving on their parents were met in the Nick Reiner case: being scolded, like at Conan O'Brien's party, being threatened to be hospitalized, which would be the conservatorship being in the works, being forced to take medications. That's maybe up in the air. That's vague. But the fact that they're making such a big to-do about his medications now makes me think that probably the parents did want him to go back on his medicines. And living with adult parents. We also know he has a trust. Cha-ching. Who is in charge of that trust and currently administering the trust beats me. And we also know that Alan Jackson quit for reasons outside Nick's control. But was Nick Reiner ever in control of anything? His medical treatment? No. When he was a kid, he tried to tell his parents, this isn't working. I don't want to do this. But they didn't listen to him. Instead, they called him a liar and a manipulator. Was he ever in control of his story? No. He wanted to do a stand-up routine. His dad threw it in the garbage and called it trash before completely usurping Nick Reiner's own story and producing it as a movie. Nick didn't want to do a movie. He wanted to do a stand-up routine. Then we saw him go on the interviews. Rob Reiner was obviously the one that was the star of those interviews, even though the movie was called Being Charlie. Rob Reiner was the star. Rob Reiner was the charismatic, funny, confident, in front of the camera, comedian, perfectionist director. Nick barely got a word in on those interviews. So was he in control of his own story even? No. Was he in control of his own life? No. And has he ever been in control of his own money? And I know some of y'all are going to say, he don't have no money. He didn't earn no money. Yeah, well, if he was out there on the streets, they would have him interventioned. These famous people don't get the opportunity to make mistakes like we do. They don't get the opportunity to make mistakes. And if they do, it's all over the tabloids and they are more harshly criticized for it than us. It's easy to say, oh, they're rich, they're famous, they must have it easy. I almost wouldn't wish it on anybody, especially if you're born into it. Now, I want to bring to y'all's attention something I should have shown you long ago. And I wanted to make a whole video on it and, all that. But where is it? Hold on. Let me pull it up. It's called the Rosenhan experiment. All right. This is the Wikipedia page. I do have the actual experiment paper here. Now, remember, the first involuntary psychiatric hold conservatorship, the LPS conservatorship in California, was invented in 1967, right? 1967, we just learned that. Yeah. Some people are saying they think it was always the intention to put him in the conservatorship, whatever. Okay, so listen to this. The Rosenhan experiment, or the THUD experiment, was an experiment this is 1973. So this is about 5 years after the LPS was put in place. Now, I do want to let you know, it was conducted throughout the country. I don't know if they did any of them in California, but this is just the time frame that asylums were still up and running. Asylums were still legal, state-run asylums and all that. So it's 1973. For the experiment, the participants submitted themselves for evaluation at various psychiatric institutions and pretended that they were having hallucinations. They pretended to have hallucinations so that they could be admitted into the hospital. But after they pretended to have hallucinations, they never, ever, ever, ever had any other psychiatric symptoms. They acted normally after that, and none of them actually had schizophrenia or were diagnosed with it previously. Each one of these participants was diagnosed with a psychiatric disorder and given antipsychotic medication. The study was arranged by a psychologist named David Rosenhan, a Stanford University professor, and it was published by the Journal of Science. This is like the biggest science journal there is, even to this day, in 1973, and it was titled On Being Sane in Insane Places. This was a critique of psychiatric diagnosis. It broached the topic of wrongful involuntary commitment. So when someone is involuntarily committed, quote, wrongfully, I think it's all wrongful. I think it's slavery, but whatever. The experiment is said to have accelerated the movement to reform mental institutions and to deinstitutionalize as many mental patients as possible. Rosenhan claimed that he, along with 8 other people, 5 men and 3 women, entered 12 separate different hospitals in 5 states near the west coast of the U.S. 3 of the participants were admitted only for a brief period of time, and in order to obtain sufficient documented experiences, they reapplied to additional institutions. Respondents defended psychiatry against the experiment's conclusions, saying that as psychiatric diagnosis relies largely on the patient's record in their own report of their experiences, so if they were the ones faking symptoms, then they would have gotten diagnosed with something for that. Okay, fair. That's fair. It's been alleged that at least part of the published results were distorted or falsified. So here's the article here, and it is several pages long, maybe 7, 8 pages, 10 pages. I don't know. We're definitely not going to read the whole thing, but I want to read the first paragraph or so. The first sentence is as follows. Well, the title is On Being Sane in Insane Places. Now, put a 1 in the chat if that one just resonates in the open air hell prison. I feel like sometimes it's us that are sane and everybody else is completely wackadoo. On being sane in insane places. Now, one thing, a big proposition that this study stood for was that just simply being in an institution, so-called institutionalized with a capital I, makes you freaking crazy. And as somebody who went to school, high school in the school to prison pipeline, I could see it. You have to become what you have to become to survive in the environment that you're in. The first sentence of this study is as follows, quote, if sanity and insanity exist, how shall we know them? And this is the question that has preoccupied my entire 2026 and a lot of 2025. If there is, in fact, and indeed, actually insanity, whatever that is, and then that must mean that there's sanity, how do we know? How shall we know them? The question is neither capricious nor itself insane. However much we may well personally be convinced that we can tell the normal from the abnormal, the evidence is simply not compelling. It is commonplace, for example, to read about murder trials wherein eminent psychiatrists for the defense are contradicted by equally eminent psychiatrists for the prosecution on the matter of whether someone is insane. And in fact, and indeed, this is going to happen in the Nick Reiner case. If they are actually going to do this not guilty by reason of insanity defense thing, it's going to be disagreed upon. Nick Reiner is going to have an expert come in and say he is insane. The government's going to have a equally qualified, maybe went to the same freaking medical school woman or man come in and say, a doctor with a bunch of letters behind their name, say he ain't insane. So true, right? Like it is common. It's common that this happens. One side will say he's insane, one won't. More generally, there are a great deal of conflicting data on the reliability, utility, and the meaning of these terms. What's the definition of sanity and insanity? What is the definition of mental illness and schizophrenia? Now he has a footnote. Oh, he cited himself, girl. Okay. Finally, as early as 1934, Benedict suggested that normality and abnormality are not universal. This is stuff that I've been saying. Not that I got it from this, but I have read this before. So maybe somewhere deep down it was tucked away in a crevice and I was bringing it up here. But like, these are the questions I wonder with the diagnosis of schizophrenia. Anyway, odd behaviors. According to who? Look, as early as 1934, that's almost 100 years ago. These scientists were suggesting what's normal and what's abnormal are not universal. What is viewed as normal in one culture may be seen as quite aberrant in another. Thus, notions of normality and abnormality also may not be quite accurate as people believe they are. To raise questions regarding normality and abnormality is in no way to question the fact that some behaviors are deviant or odd. Murder is deviant. So too are hallucinations. But raising these questions doesn't deny the existence of personal anguish that is often associated with mental illness. He's saying, I know people are suffering. They got people, mentally ill people suffering. I'm not trying to say that doesn't happen. Anxiety and depression exist. Psychological suffering exists. But normality and abnormality, sanity and insanity, and the diagnoses that flow from them may be less substantive than many believe them to be. At its heart, the question of whether the sane can be distinguished from the insane is a simple matter. Do the salient characteristics that lead to diagnoses reside in the patients themselves or in the environments and the contexts in which the observers find the patients? So is it really the person's insane, or are they maybe reacting rationally, normally, the way anyone would within the context of their circumstances? From Bloiler. Oh, Bloiler. This is the guy that kind of like preeminent scholar of schizophrenia. Through Kretschmer, through the formulations of the recently devised. So the DSM had just come out. The belief has been strong that patients present symptoms, and those symptoms can be categorized, and implicitly that the sane are distinguishable from the insane. But more recently, this belief has been questioned, based in part on the theoretical and anthropological considerations, but also on philosophical considerations, legal considerations, and even therapeutic considerations. We don't really know if someone's insane or sane. Gains can be made in deciding which of these is more nearly accurate by getting normal people, that is, people who do not have and never have suffered any symptoms of serious psychiatric disorders, and admit those normal people to psychiatric hospitals, and then determine whether they were discovered to be sane. So he's saying we wanted to basically infiltrate the psych ward. We want to put some normal people in there that never had any symptoms of any psychiatric illness ever, and see if they would be found out. They're pretending, but then once they got in there, they acted normal. And he spent a whole page saying who even knows what that even freaking is. If the sanity of these pseudo patients, the fake patients, was always detected, there would be evidence that a sane individual can be distinguished from an insane individual. Normality and presumably abnormality is distinct enough that it can be recognized. If, on the other hand, the sanity of these fake patients was never discovered by the doctors, serious difficulties would arise for those who support traditional modes of psychiatric diagnosis, given that the hospital staff was not incompetent, that the pseudo patient had been behaving as a sane person would, and that it had never previously suggested that he belonged in a psychiatric hospital. Such an unlikely outcome would support the view that psychiatric diagnosis betrays little about the patient. This article describes such an experiment. 8 sane people gained secret admission to 12 different hospitals. Their diagnostic experiences constitute the data of the first part of this article. The remainder is devoted to a description of their experiences in psychiatric institutions. Too few psychiatrists and psychologists, even those who have worked in these mental hospitals, know what the experience is actually like. They rarely talk about it with former patients, perhaps because they distrust information coming from the previously insane. It's a lifelong stigma. The doctors don't even trust you. You're a manipulative liar, according to the people who treated Nick as a child and his parents. Those who have worked in psychiatric hospitals are likely to have adapted so thoroughly to the settings that they're insensitive. They become desensitized to this crazy place. And while there have been occasional reports of researchers who submitted themselves to psychiatric hospitals, these researchers have commonly remained in the hospitals only for short periods of time, often with the knowledge of the hospital staff. It is difficult to know the extent to which they were treated like patients or like research colleagues. Nevertheless, their reports about the inside of the psychiatric hospital have been valuable. This article extends those efforts. And guess what? None of these people were ever found to be sane. Every single person had to carry the schizophrenia diagnosis or whatever the diagnosis was the whole time. Even after, when some of them were like, yeah, I lied about this, I lied about that, even to have the confirmation bias, some of the doctors would be like, oh, but he wrote notes all the time. I'm going to do a video where I go over this whole article. Put a 3 in the chat if y'all want me to go over this article in full. It is, I don't know, about 10. It looks like it's between like 7 to 15 pages. I didn't count the pages, but one of the things was like the guy was just in the cafeteria just writing notes. That was considered to be a symptom of schizophrenia. And the notes were like what people were doing. Like it was just like observations, like now old man Wilson's over there, eating his underwears or what. He wasn't drawing. He wasn't doodling. He was writing notes because he was a researcher. No one noticed he was a scientific researcher. Do these places make you insane? Does institutionalization itself contribute to insanity? Let me see if I can find that specific part. I wanted to. We may find it difficult to get along with one or another person, again, for no reason that we can specify. Similarly, the insane are not always insane. Indeed, it was the impression of the fake patients while living with them that they were sane for long periods of time. The bizarre behaviors upon which their diagnoses were allegedly predicated constituted only a small fraction of their total behavior. A broken leg is something one recovers from, but a mental illness allegedly endures forever. A broken leg does not threaten the observer, but a crazy schizophrenic? There is by now a host of evidence that attitudes toward the mentally ill are characterized by fear, hostility, aloofness, suspicion, and dread. The mentally ill are society's lepers. That such attitudes infect the general population is perhaps not surprising, but it is upsetting. But that they affect the professionals, the attendants, the nurses, physicians, psychologists, and social workers who treat and deal with the mentally ill, this is more disconcerting, both because such attitudes are self-evidently pernicious and because they're unwitting. Most mental health professionals would insist that they are sympathetic toward the mentally ill, that they're not avoidant or hostile of them. But it is more likely that an exquisite ambivalence characterizes their relations with psychiatric patients, such that their avowed impulses are only part of their entire attitude. Negative attitudes are there too and can easily be detected. He's saying that the people who dedicate their lives, their careers to this are also stigmatizing and bearing these same negative stereotypes. They are the natural offspring of the labels patients wear and the places in which they are found. Consider the structure of the the typical psychiatric hospital. Staff and patients are strictly segregated. Staff have their own living space, including their dining facilities, bathrooms, and assembly places. The glassed quarters that contain the professional staff, which the fake patients came to call the cage, sit out on every day room. The staff, girl, hold on. The staff emerge primarily for caretaking purposes, to give medication, conduct therapy or a group meeting, to instruct or to reprimand a patient. Otherwise, staff keeps to themselves, almost as if the disorder that afflicts their charges is contagious. So much is patient-staff segregation the rule that for 4 public hospitals in which an attempt was made to measure the degree to which staff and patients mingle, it was necessary to use time out of the staff cage as the operational measure. While it was not the case that all the time spent out of this cage was spent mingling with patients, it was the only way in which we could gather the reliable data for measuring. The average amount of time spent by the workers at the mental institutions outside of their glass box that they were in was 11% of their time. This figure does not represent only the time spent mingling with patients, but also time spent on chores, folding laundry, supervising patients while they shave, directing a ward cleanup. Hold on, I want to find the institutional commentary. This. Powerlessness and depersonalization. Eye contact and verbal contact reflect concern and individuation. Their absence, avoidance, and depersonalization. So if somebody contacts you, eye contact, or somebody speaks, "Hey, hi, how you doing this morning?" That reflects concern and allows the patient to continue feeling like they are an individual person. But if you don't get any eye contact or verbal contact other than just getting hollered at and told you're a liar and a manipulator all the time, then it can result in avoidance and depersonalization. And so if you're reading this, you start to understand how it could be the case that institutionalization in an involuntary psychiatric incarceration setting, involuntary, could be a risk factor for schizophrenia because it increases avoidance and depersonalization by the very hierarchy, the nature of the asylum. The data this guy has presented does not do justice to the rich daily encounters that grew up around matters of depersonalization. I have records of patients who were beaten by staff for the sin of having initiated verbal contact. You just, hey, how are you? Boom, 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 get beat. You could leave out of these places way worse than you went in. He said during his own experience, for example, one patient was beaten in the presence of other patients for having approached an attendant and saying, "I like you." Somebody walked up to a doctor, said, "I like you," and got beat. Or a nurse or a staff or whatever. Occasionally, punishment meted out to patients for misdemeanors seems so excessive that it could not be justified by even the most radical interpretations of the psychiatric canon. Nevertheless, they appeared to go unquestioned. Tempers were short. A patient who had not heard a call for medication would be roundly excoriated, and the morning attendants would often wake patients with, "Come on, you MFs! Out of the bed!" Neither anecdotal nor hard data can convey the overwhelming sense of powerlessness which invades the individual as he is continually exposed to the depersonalization of the psychiatric hospital. It hardly matters which psychiatric hospital. The excellent public ones, very plush private hospitals, were better than the rural and shabby ones in this regard. But again, the features that psychiatric hospitals had in common overwhelmed by far their apparent differences. Powerlessness was evident everywhere. The patient is deprived of many of his legal rights. Write it down. The patient is deprived of many of his legal rights by virtue of the fact he's just in the, psych ward. He is shorn of his credibility. So they steal the credibility away by virtue of being labeled with a psychiatric label. Put a 5 in the chat if he's preaching. His freedom of movement is restricted. He cannot initiate contact with the staff unless he wants to get beat. He can only respond to them. Personal privacy, minimal. Patient quarters and possessions can be entered and examined by any staff member for whatever reason. His personal history and anguish is available to any staff member, often including the gray lady and the candy striper volunteer, who chooses to read his folder, regardless of their therapeutic relationship to him. His personal hygiene and waste evacuation are often monitored. The water closet, the toilets often have no doors. At times, depersonalization reached such proportions that the fake patients had the sense that they were invisible, or at least unworthy of account. Upon being admitted, this guy says he did it too. He and other fake patients took the initial physical exam in a semi-public room. Staff members went about their own business as if they weren't even there. On the ward, attendants delivered verbal and occasionally serious physical abuse to patients in the presence of other patients, some of whom were writing it all down. Abusive behavior, on the other hand, terminated quite abruptly when the other staff members were known to be coming. Staff are credible witnesses. Patients are not. A nurse unbuttoned her uniform to adjust her bra in the presence of an entire ward of viewing men. One did not have the sense that she was being seductive. Rather, she didn't even notice us. A group of staff people might point to a patient in the day room and discuss him animatedly as if he wasn't even there. One illuminating instance of depersonalization and invisibility occurred with regard to medications. All told, the fake patients were administered nearly 2,100 pills, including Elavil, Stelazine, Compazine, Thorazine, to name a few. That such a variety of medications could have been administered to patients who all had identical symptoms itself is worthy of note. So they're just passing drugs out. Thanks, Rothschilds. Only 2 pills were swallowed. The rest were pocketed or deposited in the toilet. So they weren't taking their medicines. They were throwing them away. Although I have no precise record on how many patients rejected their medications, the pseudo patients frequently found the medications of other patients in the toilet before they deposited their own. As long as they were cooperative, their behavior went unnoticed. Reactions to such depersonalization among pseudo patients was intense. So these people went in here normal. They went in sane. They went in not ever having any psychiatric. That was part of to participate in the study. You could not have ever had a psychiatric diagnosis. You could never have had even anxiety symptoms. I mean, that's kind of hard to imagine, but this was back in the 60s and 70s. I don't remember which number it was for the whole article. I think that was 3. Reactions to the, okay, so, but once, this is what I was trying to get at here with this study and with this report, and this is a big part of this, is that these are the things, these institutions make asylums great again. I've seen that little kitschy, little stupid ass little saying going around. This is what you're going to get. There's no way to tell if somebody in an asylum is actually crazy or not. And if somebody's mama or daddy just lies on them, they could get put in one. If somebody's abusive husband or abusive wife, abusive mother-in-law just starts to lie. Oh, she was having hallucinations the other night. She's schizophrenic. Remember, Bam, my wife is in that room. She's not in there. He's schizophrenic. They lied and said she was in there. But because Bam's schizophrenic, which I don't even know if that's true, he wasn't believed. So they're trying to tell me that these long-term psychiatric holds are what's going to fix the problem. It's going to make it to where Tommy Lee Jones' daughter didn't kill herself. It's going to make it to where Nick REINER was in a conservatorship. Didn't help if he did do this stuff. This is the solution they're trying to offer, y'all. Let's pluck all the homeless people up off the street and put them in asylums. This is what it's a prison where they drug you. They don't even treat them as a human being, and it makes them worse. Completely, totally, supposedly sane people, which again, the very beginning of this article, the guy says it. He's like, look, I don't even know what these definitions are. I don't even know what these definitions are, if somebody is sane or insane. And even if I did know, who's to really say if somebody's sane or insane? But like, okay, fine, let's go with it. Here's some sane people. They're doctors, they're clinicians, they themselves are experts at things, and they've never ever had any psychiatric diagnosis, no mental health conditions at all, no symptoms at all. They started to go crazy in the insane asylum. Look, reactions to this depersonalization among the fake patients was intense. Although they had come to the hospital as participant observers and were fully aware they didn't belong there, they found themselves caught up in and fighting the process of depersonalization. Some examples: a graduate student in psychology asked his wife to bring his textbooks to the hospital so he could catch up on his homework. Despite the elaborate precautions taken to conceal his professional association, the same student who had trained for quite some time to get into the hospital and who had looked forward to the experience remembered some drag races that he wanted to see on the weekend and insisted that he be discharged by that time. Another pseudo patient attempted a romance with a nurse. Subsequently, he informed the staff that he was applying for admission to graduate school in psychology and was very likely to be admitted since a graduate professor was one of his regular hospital visitors. The same person began to engage in psychotherapy with other patients. All of this was a way of becoming a person in an impersonal environment. Heavy reliance upon psychotropic medication contributes to depersonalization by convincing staff that treatment is needed. That treatment is indeed being conducted and that further patient contact may not be necessary. But even here, caution needs to be exercised in understanding the role of these drugs. If patients were powerful rather than powerless, if they were viewed as interesting individuals rather than diagnostic entities, if they were socially significant rather than social lepers, if their anguish truly and wholly compelled our sympathies and concerns, would we not seek contact with them despite the availability of the medications? Whenever the ratio of what is known to what needs to be known approaches zero, we tend to invent knowledge. We seem unable to acknowledge that we simply don't know. The needs for diagnosis and remediation of behavioral and emotional problems are enormous. So he's saying, look, we need to address the stuff. There's definitely people out here who need addressing. The mental, the psychology, the psychiatric. But rather than acknowledge that, we're just embarking on understanding. We continue to label patients schizophrenic, manic depressive, and insane as if those words had captured the full understanding. The facts of the matter are we don't know. Woo. He said, we've known for a long time diagnoses are often not useful or reliable, but we continue to use them. We now know we cannot distinguish insanity from sanity. It is depressing to consider how that information will be used. Not merely depressing, but frightening. How many people, one wonders, are sane, but not recognized as such in our psychiatric institutions? How many have been needlessly stripped of their privileges of citizenship, from the right to vote and drive to handling their own accounts? How many have faked insanity in order to avoid criminal consequences of their behavior? And how many would rather stand trial than live in a psychiatric hospital, but they wrongly are thought to be mentally ill? How many have been stigmatized by well-intentioned, but nevertheless wrong diagnoses? On the last point, recall again that a type 2 error in psychiatric diagnosis does not have the same consequences as it does in a medical diagnosis. A diagnosis of cancer that has been found to be an error is a cause for celebration, but psychiatric diagnoses are rarely found to be in error. The label sticks, a mark of inadequacy forever. Finally, how many patients might be sane outside of a psychiatric hospital, but they seem insane inside of it? Not because craziness resides in them, as it were, but because they are responding to a bizarre setting, one that may be unique to institutions that harbor nether people. Goffman calls the process of socialization into these institutions mortification. An apt metaphor that includes the process of depersonalization that's been described here, all happening while it is possible to know whether the fake patient's responses to those processes are characteristics of all inmates. They were, after all, not real patients. It's difficult to believe that these processes of socialization to a psychiatric hospital provide useful attitudes or habits of response for living in the real world. Okay, so they don't help. Asylums don't help. They make people who are sane worse. So this is the solution. This is what we should have done for Nick Reiner. It don't work. This is medical literature. Anyway. I can get more into that study at a later date. I do want to talk about Timothy Busfield, okay? Apparently, according to his lawyer, he done took a polygraph test. So I want to cover that. He voluntarily took a polygraph test. So that's a lie detector test. Okay. This is a this CBS News article. It came out today, this morning. Actor Timothy Busfield held without bond in New Mexico child abuse case. Emmy Award-winning actor Timothy Busfield made his first court appearance 2 days ago, a day after turning himself into authorities to face charges. He was ordered held without bond. He appeared remotely. He appeared remotely via video link from jail. Whether he remains in jail will be the subject of a detention hearing scheduled for Tuesday. Albuquerque police issued a warrant for his arrest last week on 2 counts of criminal contact with a minor and 1 count of child abuse. A criminal complaint alleges the acts occurred on the set of the series The Cleaning Lady that was filmed in Albuquerque. Okay, so here is a statement from his lawyer. Tim Busfield denies the allegations in the criminal complaint and maintains they are completely false. As a voluntary step, he submitted to an independent polygraph examination regarding those allegations, and he passed. The 68-year-old actor, who is married to Melissa Gilbert and is known for appearances in The West Wing, he's also a director. He vowed to fight the charges in a video shared before turning himself in. During Wednesday's brief court appearance, he stood silent and expressionless. Oh, hold on. Dressed in orange prison clothes while a defense attorney spoke on his behalf. Prosecutors are seeking to keep him in custody, citing a history of alleged misconduct. They filed a motion early Wednesday detailing their reasons for the request, pointing to what they described as a documented pattern of SUL misconduct, abuse of authority, and grooming behavior by Busfield over 2 decades. They also said witnesses have expressed fear regarding retaliation and professional harm. So that's kind of like a nod to like witness intimidation, supposedly, allegedly. Another allegation was reported to law enforcement the same day Busfield turned himself in. Father of then 16-year-old girl alleged Busfield kissed and inappropriately touched his daughter who he said was auditioning for a role at the B Street Theater, an organization Busfield and his brother founded in Sacramento, California. The incident occurred several years ago. Busfield allegedly begged the family not to report it to law enforcement if he received therapy. The girl's father, who's a therapist himself, said he thought it was the best thing to do at the time. In a statement to CBS Sacramento, the theater has spoken out. They said that though Busfield is its founder, he hasn't had an active role in its operations in any capacity since 2001. The theater declined to comment further on Busfield due to the ongoing investigation. The motion filed in court to keep him in jail also states that research and experience show that offenders are uniquely positioned to evade accountability and circumvent safeguards designed to protect children when they wield authority, status, or influence. In light of the defendant's demonstrated disregard for boundaries, authority, and compliance, no condition or combination of conditions of release can reasonably protect the victims or the community. It'll be up to a judge to determine whether or not to grant the request. A detention hearing has yet to be scheduled. It is scheduled now. They do have one scheduled, I think. Prosecutors also took, maybe they don't, maybe I have that wrong. Prosecutors also took issue with Busfield disseminating a video to TMZ. They said he was prioritizing his personal narrative control and public relations over complying with the court process. Now, I mean, I'm not trying to rush out to defend Timothy Busfield by any means, but I do like to defend people's rights and the constitutional rights of all of us, because if they erode one person's, they can erode yours next. So I don't actually think he was doing anything wrong by putting out his side of the story. He does have freedom of speech and he is allowed to say his side, especially considering he probably ain't going to get out of jail, at least before the trial. So it was pretty much his only time and his only chance to get his word, get his side of the story out. And I think we, the people, deserve to know what his side of the story is. Instead of hearing it from anonymous sources, we got it from him. His side of the story is that he didn't do anything wrong with those children. And it seems like his lawyer is implying that he passed on polygraph test. So it'll be interesting to see what the defense looks like. According to the criminal complaint, an investigator with the police department says the child reported he was 7 years old when Busfield allegedly touched him multiple times in inappropriate areas, and he allegedly touched him on another occasion when he was 8. The complaint also says the child was reportedly afraid to tell anyone because Busfield was the director of the show, and he feared that Busfield would get mad at him. The boy's twin brother told authorities, okay, we already read this. So that was what I wanted to show y'all about the polygraph test, the lie detector test. But People magazine also reported some more things about that. The 16-year-old girl who alleges, or her father alleges, that, she was auditioning for the B Street Theater and this guy did something to her. And the somethings are specifically laid out, but I'm not going to repeat them. I did talk about it in my last video about it. Theater, where Timothy Busfield allegedly abused a 16-year-old girl, confirms that a 2001 internal investigation happened and says he hasn't been involved in the operations of the theater for 25 years. The actor was charged with 2 counts, Timothy Busfield was charged with 2 counts, this, that, the other, 11-year-old, this, that, the other. But also he was accused of abusing a 16-year-old girl at a California theater, quote, several years ago. The theater company, B Street Theater, confirmed in a statement to People it did retain legal counsel to conduct an internal investigation into the allegation, and that Busfield has not been involved since 2001. Okay. Confirms 2001 internal investigation. So putting these little clues together, we had a People magazine title that says there was an investigation in 2001. We also have in the title, he hasn't been involved in 25 years. Well, it's 2026. 2001 was 25 years ago. So that leads me to assume based on these publicly disclosed facts right here, publicly disclosed at people.com, they probably found something pretty serious if he's no longer involved ever since 2001. Okay, so when was the investigation? It says in the title it was in 2001. Now, is that true? Could they get it wrong? Could they have gotten it wrong? Could they be lying to our face? Sure, all that. But if people.com is to be believed, 2001 is when the investigation was, and 2001 is right around about the time he stopped working for his own theater. So what about recently? We were also told Warner Brothers did a similar such investigation. They didn't find anything supposedly wrong, no wrongdoing. They weren't able to corroborate. So Timothy did not get in any trouble, it seems like, over there at Warner Brothers. He was still directing on The Cleaning Lady. And so somebody needs to tell me how bad it had to be all the way back in 2001. This guy got removed from the operations of his own theater, and he begged and begged the dad not to report him. I guess that therapy didn't work either. Busfield was charged with 2 counts of criminal assault. Charges are in connection with a California theater company says Timothy Busfield has not been involved. Wait, hold on. In a pretrial motion, prosecutors mentioned that Timothy Busfield was accused of abusing a 16-year-old girl several years ago. The theater company confirmed in a statement to People that it retained legal counsel to conduct an internal investigation into the allegation, and Timothy has not been involved since 2001. They say he hasn't been involved in his role at the theater following an internal investigation that came after he was accused of abusing a 16-year-old girl there 25 years ago. He was charged with 2 counts. The charges are in connection with him being a director on The Cleaning Lady. The pretrial detention motion was filed 2 days ago. According to the motion, another victim's father, Colin Swift, while auditioning for Busfield at the B Street Theater, the 16-year-old reported that Busfield kissed her, put his hands where they shouldn't have gone, and touched her where he shouldn't have touched. He's married to Melissa Gilbert, allegedly begged the family not to report it to law enforcement if he received therapy. He's aware. The B Street Theater is aware of a report concerning Timothy Busfield regarding an incident having occurred. We retain legal counsel. He's not involved in our current operations, staff, leadership, or programming. Although he is listed as an emeritus board member, he's not participated in theater governance or attended a board meeting since 2001. Because the allegation is now part of an active investigation into the unrelated allegations in New Mexico, the B Street Theater said they couldn't provide further information. As an organization that has served Sacramento in the greater region for decades, our mission remains to provide safe, creative, and inclusive environment for artists, students, families, and audiences. Our thoughts are with everyone affected by abuse or exploitation in any form. The allegations were never challenged, they were never proved, and they're 25 years old. And there doesn't seem to be any connection between these allegations regarding women 25 years ago. Well, a child. It was a child. It was 16 years old. And the allegations regarding these young boys. So the lawyer is saying the allegations were never challenged, they were never proved, and they're 25 years old. But an independent investigation was performed, and he surely did stop all his roles at the theater other than being listed on the website. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying I certainly wasn't there. All right. 2001, I was about 10 years old. So who knows what went on over there? Innocent till proven guilty. Thanks so much to Jenny J for the $1.99 super chat. Appreciate your hard work. Thanks for all you do. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much to Hope for the $1.99 super chat. You've helped me through a lot with just being you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So that's all I really had for this one. Next time, I want to talk about Hailey Bieber's sister doing things unspeakable in 2024. And I want to also maybe touch on Carrie Underwood. There was apparently something found in an old, like, shut down club where she had performed, and it was something really crazy. And it just kind of like shows the handler vibes of it all. Um, Things to think about. The name of that article that I was reading, if you type in Google on being sane in insane places, you can read that article. And it definitely does. It definitely does, I think, support a lot of the intuitions that I do have about these things. It's like, I totally understand wanting to help people. I really do. But we got to get to, first of all, a definition of what even is help. Because if you're just locking people up, making them sicker, making them worse, drugging them with your drug of choice, which oftentimes have their own detrimental consequences, and then you're taking away that person's God-given, constitutionally protected, inalienable right to even make the decisions on their own. How do we know that these medications weren't what spiraled Nick REINER into this supposed psychosis in the very first place? How do we know he was never psychotic and actually he was just cussing his parents out because they were depraved freaks? We don't know. And, I know that there is that FBI agent, a former FBI agent online who already has her mind made up. Like, she's a former FBI agent and also medical professional because she just knows. She just knows whether someone is insane or sane. But as it turns out from the medical literature, it's kind of impossible to really tell in some environments. As we learn from the medical literature, once people are diagnosed with something, their credibility is shot. People believe staff, people believe the parents, but not the patient. Things to think about. That's all I really had for this one. In the meantime, facts ain't defamation. Neither are opinions, neither questions, neither are speculations. Love you, Minnie K. Bye.